It is a distinct pleasure. Let's get her on the screen. Catriona Le May Doan, two-time Olympic gold medalist, bronze medalist, chef de mission for the COC this year in Beijing. Proud Saskatoonian. Canada's most amazing smile. Catriona, welcome to the RP Show. Good to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well. When you say smile, I'm so not used to wearing a mask 18 hours a day.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't have had to
weird.
cover that up. Although some people I've seen, I'm like, you should put a mask back on. But not that smile. No, hey, welcome back.
Thank you.
You made it safely.
Yes.
Beijing was awesome.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was actually so well done. I say the three V's, the volunteers, the village, and the venues, were spectacular.
Good.
And going in, everybody said, things will be different. And I reminded the athletes, every games is different. So yes, it will be different. But I don't know if we expected it to be that great. The first few hours in the village, everybody said this is so much better than Pyeongchang 2018. Venues took your breath away. People walked into the Oval and they actually started crying. It was gorgeous. There was a feeling within the venues. Volunteers, all of the students, they spoke English really well. They all helped. It was so well done.
I love to hear that because you know the media. I'm sitting back here reading the reports of the athletes that were quarantined, and they said how horrible that was. The quarters, the food. You never experienced any of that then?
No, I mean the biggest stress was the month prior to going because of Omicron.
Mm-hmm.
I mean the athletes have dealt with the pandemic for the last 2 years. So when people say daily testing, they're like, yeah, we're used to that. Masking, we're used to that.
Right.
So they've lived in these bubbles. The last month before going, the athletes really had to isolate. Continue to train, continue to compete wherever they were in the world. And then the first week, because there were positives, but they were, I learned all these terms, persistent shedders. So it was people who had COVID, and the chief medical officer, Dr. Mike Wilkinson, and the whole medical team, they did such a good job, but people were isolated because they were testing positive from shedding, from previous infection. For 450 people on the ground, the day of the game starting, we were at zero. We were at zero, and we stayed at zero. So that's pretty incredible. And so people were isolated. A couple of them did have to go to the isolation hotels. And from our team, it wasn't what the reports in the media were saying. So I would just say,
who knows,
no
right?
offense, but don't always trust the media.
I know it. I know it. It drives me nuts, to be honest with you, that you don't know what story you're getting. But if I have this right, 28 medals? 26 medals?
Yes.
One more than the United States.
Yes.
That I know. That's what I was watching. And I think you finished 4th overall in medals. So how was the take? How did you feel it went? Success-wise.
Yeah, and you know what? I question the number of because I never look at number of medals.
Oh, you don't?
No, I never do.
Okay.
I never did as an athlete. I never did as media, and I never have as mission team.
You better explain why, because I always do.
Yeah.
Every day I check it.
Well, and because everybody puts that as expectations.
Yeah.
It's sport. I mean, if we knew where we were going to end up, and yeah, people like to predict, but we could have told you, these are the people who are expected to win medals. My goodness, this is the Olympic Games. There are always surprises, good and bad, and we had those. Going into these games, the COC did not put a medal count as an expectation. Canada as a nation, yes, everybody was under strict protocols, but Canada was under a tougher protocol than the rest of the world because the bubbles that happened, not this past season, the season before, they were all in Europe. They were under less restrictions than Canada was. We had everything shut down, training facilities. I mean, if you look at speed skating, they didn't have an oval for 1 year. And so when you look at what our expectations were, it was more of the top 5s, top 8s. Mm-hmm. So we exceeded probably what the COC had wanted. To me, when I look at performance, it was unbelievable. Like,
of course,
athletes surprise themselves, and that's what I love to see. And, they like a lot of 4ths, a lot of 5ths, which are always frustrating. But then there were these maybe surprise medals and in a lot of new events, which is pretty great as well.
See, that's what we love about sport. And for instance, Jonathan Cripps was in that chair last Friday, and he said when he was putting his helmet on for the final, he goes, the pressure hit him. He goes, and I smiled. He's like, this is what I train for. You know what I mean?
Well, I never felt like that.
I know.
as an
I was like,
athlete.
wow. But then
Yeah.
you're in the right business then.
Yeah, for sure.
To smile. I thought that was a really cool story.
It's great. And especially, and they didn't know. So I was at that event. So that was our last medal chance. Last day of the games up in Yanqing, which is one of the 3 clusters. And as they're coming down the track, they were only 1/100th ahead of the Germans. And at that time, Germans were 1, 2, and 3.
Yep.
And so Justin and his team were 1/100th. And I asked them later, I said, did you guys realize? And they said, no, we don't know. And so we're sitting there in a hard position because it's probably easier to be the athlete in certain ways than the spectator. But yeah, they rose to the pressure. I was so happy for them.
Oh, he's carrying the medal around, of course, and those suckers are heavy. Were they as heavy in the 90s as these ones now? Like Benny Hebert's from 2010, like you put it around your neck and you know.
They're all different. Salt Lake City was heavy, but I joked that, it was an American medal. It was the U.S. They wanted to be the biggest and the heaviest super
as
size.
usual. Yeah, of course.
So they're all different. They're all really different.
Your story of hanging out with Shane Doan, I thought was cool because I've had the great pleasure of being around Shane. And when I say great pleasure, it's because he's like you. He's like the light. He's always smiling, always bubbly, always positive. And you said, I never thought that he was going to be with a hockey team. I thought when the NHLers were out, he'd be up, but that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think his title was general manager.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of say. And I mean, he's my ex-cousin-in-law, but I mean, to my kids, he's still sort of Uncle Shane. And so I'd taken some photos and sent them, and they're like, is that Shane? What's he doing there? And, he's salt of the earth. He was great.
Yeah.
The men's team, they struggled, and they were frustrated, and they were upset. But after they were done, a lot of the players and Shane and some of the coaching staff, they came to other events. They came to long track, and they came to cheer on the other athletes, which didn't happen in Tokyo. So that was one of the pluses because we didn't know if that was going to be possible, but within this closed loop in Beijing, you could do that. And, he's a great guy. I think for him, because I believe his only Olympic qualification was 2006 and they didn't win a medal. So in a way, I feel like that 2022 was going to be maybe his redemption. So I felt bad for the team and I felt bad for him, but it's also an indication that, you go to the Olympics and it's
no guarantees.
And it's a tough situation.
Well, I had some friends on that team and I watched just about every game and they didn't play well. So there's that too. You know what I mean? I mean, whatever, but Shane will be back. And the thing with him in Arizona is because a friend of mine owned that team. And so I was spending time around the team. That's where I got to be with Shane. He is the most iconic Coyote in franchise history. As you know, he'll be back. Because he's good at what he does.
Exactly. I
got to ask you this too, though. For obviously everybody knows who you are, but 3-time Olympic medalist, 2 golds, 1 bronze, 2-time flag bearer, Canadian Sports Hall of Fame, an officer with Order of Canada, and then 2010 the Cauldron. It comes up in your Wikipedia. We're all watching, of course.
Yeah.
Were you dying inside?
You have an earpiece and the producer talks to you and says, okay, keep the music going. And people on the outside had told me later, they're thinking, wow, this is going to be dramatic. Meanwhile, the trap door of the arm of my arm of the cauldron is going,
you could hear it? Or?
Oh, well, no, I'm making up.
Yeah. I got
but
it.
But you could see it. And I'm like, oh man. So then when the producer said, you're going to turn and salute the IOC, I'm like, I felt like stomping my feet going, why me?
I don't want to do that.
Why not Gretzky's? Like, why does mine have to screw up? Yeah. But, it ended up working out and they brought me in for the closing. And so I think at Vancouver, I carried the torch 4 different times. And I think that's a record. So just had to do a little stat.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, so it was you and Wayne are the only ones that remember. Do you remember
Nancy
who the
Green?
other? Nancy Green,
Steve
Ski
Nash.
Great, and Steve Nash. Well, that's no slouches there either.
No.
Yeah, and what was, of all those ceremonies, when you say all the Olympics are different, I guess all the ceremonies are different then, right? Or do they kind of feel the same?
No, they feel totally different. But I often say that my most sort of emotional Olympic moment was October 30th, 2009. Simon Whitfield and I were the first torchbearers. As an athlete, you prepare. As media, you prepare. You're ready for situations, be ready for surprises. In that moment, we were the first ones to light the first torch, start the relay. We didn't know what to expect. And I remember lighting it and jogging down that first 100 meters and being overwhelmed with the the looks on people's faces, not as they looked at us, as they looked at the flame. And I believe 100% in the power of the Olympic Games, the power of the flame and the power of the rings. But that moment overwhelmed me. And I think just, having young kids at the time and sort of seeing it in a different perspective. So that would probably be my most emotional Olympic moment. But then being chef, I've always said that has been my dream, and it really came full circle. So, it's sort of it was the icing on the cake. And I guess I look at things now saying, what now? What now on that side? I work day to day in community sport, being CEO of Sport Calgary, but I kind of go, what now on that side?
Of course.
And I don't know. I can't answer the question. So
is it scary, or you just know it's going to be good no matter what?
It's intimidating for sure. I'm 51 years old, and I sit there and go, what am I going to do when I grow up? And I've lived parts of my dream. And what's really neat is it was stressful for my kids for me to leave for a month, especially for my 17-year-old daughter. But she said to me the other day, Mommy, it's done. You're back. We made it through. And so, they see that I'm able to volunteer for a month, live what I want to live, but be a part of everything with them as well. So it's exciting. But yeah, it's intimidating because I look at where I want to be and how do I get there?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned we did that event in Weyburn together. It was the Red Wings fundraising banquet. And you were saying to me at the table, but also in your speech, how difficult it was in the 90s training financially, right? So when I talk to Olympic athletes now, Justin Crimp's the most recent, I'm like, was it a struggle? And he's like, not as bad as it used to be. We've got sponsors, blah, blah, blah. So were you a bit of a trailblazer in that regard, do you think, getting that story out there? Maybe. Is there more sponsorship now than there was?
I think there is more sponsorship. It is a bit of a different world, which is great for the athletes. I think what people don't realize is any of these roles don't come with a paycheck. I mean, I took my 4 weeks holiday. This was a volunteer role, being chef de mission. So, when people say make sure and take a week off, it's like, I don't have a week to take off. I'm back to work. But it's for sure easier for the athletes. But again, no athlete then just sits there and says, okay, now I'm just going to live the life of luxury, because that's not what it's like. The athletes are driven individuals. And so I think for myself, it didn't come with, much of a paycheck, but I didn't necessarily want that, because it's, what am I going to do from being on the podium? How do I use that to sort of better sport? And that's the personality of most athletes.
Well, I learned so much chatting with you, and I can't remember if that was before or after Michael Phelps did his 10 medals, but you were explaining how in America, it's different.
In a lot of countries, it's different.
Yeah.
I mean, for sure, in the U.S., they definitely get big bonuses for Olympic medals. If I was in Holland, I'd be a gazillionaire, because we are like the NHL players. So to put it in perspective, when I had my daughter in May 2004, it was on their national news. So speed skaters in Holland, we're the big thing. We're the most famous of all sporting.
You ever thought of moving to Holland?
No. I love Canada. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I love tulips, but still. I like to, and some of them are my best friends, but it's just different. But that's not our choice of choosing the path of being an Olympic athlete for Canada. That's not why we do it.
Of course.
So some sports have shows. I mean, I was talking to the figure skaters. Some of them are trying to figure out what they're going to do next. And they said, we'll do some shows and financially that makes sense for us. And then we'll wait and see. So, some sports have opportunities like that.
Yes, but you shouldn't have to be living on Campbell's soup and craft dinner either. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. My parents paid my rent until the day I retired, until I was 32 years old. And so I was very fortunate for that. But not every athlete has that opportunity.
So with the chef, I say chef de mission. I always have, I guess I should update that if it's chef de mission, because Leah said the same thing. What is that job?
So it's leading up. And you apply for the position. Leading up, it's sort of the spokesperson, the leader, the front and center, and there was a lot of controversy. Obviously, between the games being in China and through the pandemic, there was a lot of controversy, and I embrace that, because to me, you go back to the meaning of sport, and we needed these games for sport. We needed it at the most basic community level. We needed it at the high performance level, and we needed that inspiration as a country, and also, through the pandemic, sport was taken away. So again, that's another message of how do we get sport back and make it a priority? And again, I don't mean that every athlete, every person involved in sport is going to be at this highest level, but we need people to be active and to be healthy, physically, mentally, and socially. So once the games began, and so leading up, I would also have meetings with the athletes, virtual. The only actually team announcement I got to go to were the curling trials in Saskatoon, and then Omicron hit, so then everything was changed. But at the games, it was because of this closed loop system. There were no real issues. I felt like I had 215 children, and I was the mom to them. And I think also for me, I'd lost my mom 2 weeks before the game started, so it was a situation where my mom was at every game, so parents can't be at these games. This is my role now. And
that's a good way to look at it.
Well, it's the way it was. And literally athletes, like I would look at a schedule the night before and I'd be like, okay, I can take the train here, and I would get to all 3 clusters and I'd be at 5 or 6 events, and literally athletes were like, wait, we just saw you in Zhengzhou.
You're everywhere.
Wait, you were in Yanqing. How are you here? But that's what I loved. And I got direct messages from athletes saying, from one of the biathletes saying, hey, I didn't know you were at my event, but while I was skiing, I heard the drum and I knew you were there. Thanks for coming and cheering. And that to me was the role I needed to be. And it was like, again, full circle. I said I would never get the Olympic rings tattoo until I was chef de mission. I got it 2 months before the games.
Wow.
And that's how much it meant to me.
Awesome. I love that. I almost let you go, and then I realized I have to ask you about Russia and them being banned from almost all world sporting events. And you must have a take on this situation.
A take? An opinion?
An opinion, however.
Yeah, very frustrating. I don't get into social media debates until some people say, oh, you can't win unless you're doping. And Marnie McBean and I, we will fight that one to the death, because we're proof that you can win clean. So the fact that, it was very frustrating in China, the situation with the figure skating, the situation that they're called the Russian Olympic Committee, yet they're not supposed to be under Russia. That'd be like us being called the Canadian Olympic Committee. So the steps need to be stronger on the sporting side. They need to discipline the athletes. There needs to be repercussions for cheating. And so, people say, well, it's unfortunate because athletes that are clean or aren't doing anything bad are being punished, but you are under the country flag of Russia. And so that's the consequence. So things need to happen on that International Olympic Committee level. And everybody says it, even at the closing ceremony in Beijing at the Olympics. The top 2 in the 50K, and that ceremony is always done at the closing ceremony. The gold medal, silver medalists were from Russia, and they had their flag pinned to their sleeve. Why is that even allowed when billions of people are watching? So it's frustrating. So yes, I have an opinion on it.
Well, sports is, although it seems vast, it's kind of a small community. And I've had a lot of friends that have coached, officiated, obviously participated at the Olympics, and the stories that I hear, especially on the judging side of the opportunities for bribes offered. That's a whole other thing, right? That's Summer Olympics. That was boxing. You must have been happy that you were just competing against the clock.
Yeah. And you know what? I truly believe that everybody I was racing against was clean. People said I was naive. And I said, well, if they are dirty, I just proved that you can be clean and beat them. So there you go.
Makes winning better, right?
Yeah. And, I just last night was starting to watch Icarus with my 17-year-old daughter, because they were talking about it within her ringette team and within social studies, with what's happening in the Ukraine and Russia. And so we were watching it, and she was just flabbergasted that something like this could go up to such a high level of politics. And so, we've made sure, and I love working with the Canadian Olympic Committee, but knowing that anybody who is involved in the Sochi Games, I will never be involved with anybody, whether they're Canadian or not. If they were involved in those games from that Russian side, no.
Do you support your friend Wayne Gretzky and those that say Russia should be banned because of their invasion of Ukraine from world events? You support that take?
Well, probably. What I support is that Russia as a whole, sporting and everything else, there needs to be consequences. The sporting side has not had the discipline that they deserve because they continue to get caught in doping situations. So how will it make a difference? is that by banning all Russian sports, perhaps, which was talked about before and not really done. So, any sort of discipline, you kind of go, oh, okay, well, that's all right. No, people need to be disciplined. There needs to be respect. And so as soon as there's a lack of respect for yourself and for others, and that's where it's at right now on the sporting side from Russia.
Great answer. Now, before I let you, no, I'm serious, man. I haven't thought of it that way. It's very well thought out. I don't know if you probably didn't know I was going to ask you about that.
I did not.
So thinking on your feet. Now, the drum.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
Well, and I brought it because I read social media. I looked at it and people said, is she going to bring the drum? This was a gift from Chief Wilton Littlechild, who's an honored member of Canada Sports Hall of Fame. And it was a beautiful ceremony. And the fact that I'd actually just lost my mom a week before, and she had taught in Saskatoon at a 99% First Nations school. It was just, and Willie was just, he was very, it was beautiful. So the bag is gorgeous. I ended up stopping to bring the bag because I just carried the drum. The bear is about team and courage, and that's what our team needed. And so they actually gifted this drum, and there was a blessing that was done by Elder Lightning, and it was from all four corners because they knew that athletes were coming from all four corners of Canada, but also four corners of the earth when we were gathering in Beijing, because athletes were coming from all over. So I took this drum everywhere, and I took a photo that it was at every single venue. I used it so much that there might be a little bit of duct tape on the inside. It did crack, but the cold was extreme.
I heard that. Minus 20s.
Oh, with
Justin
wind,
said?
With wind, it was into the minus 30s. At cross country and biathlon, my goodness, those athletes are so tough anyway. And then in that weather. But, this drum and people heard it on TV and they said, okay, we know that. And so Chief Willie had said, this is going to be the heartbeat of all people. So it will gather all people in Canada, and then the heartbeat will also be all people in China. So this was a representative of all people cheering for the athletes. And I had one tweet from a mom of the skeleton athlete, like 20 years old, and she posted a picture, and it brought me to tears. She said, when you can't be there for your son, but the heartbeat of Canada is there cheering him on. And then one of the biathletes who had said, thank you, I heard the drum while I was skiing. So it was just the fact of being there and being a presence and having the drum with me. Thomas Bach, who's the president of the IOC, he was like, I hear the drum. And then when we come out of an event and he's like, there you are, Catriona, you have the drum with you. And so even the president of the IOC was doing that. I was on the train one day and one of the guys walked by and said, oh, I'm with NBC. There's the drum. We hear it all the time. So
everybody knew. Yeah.
It became known. And I just thought how special that this is. It was an example of, the COC's commitment to reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. And so.
And it just happened. Right?
It just happened.
Organic.
They had it in Tokyo. They had one in Tokyo. It was from a different nation. And this was from the Maskwaci, which is just north of Red Deer, just south of Edmonton. And, even the date of the person who made it was January 11th, 2022. Ooh. So it was
fresh.
Yeah. And even I'm going to tell you, even with the crack, it still
sounds amazing.
I know. And so, my kids said, what do we do with it now? And I'm like, well, I guess I'll talk to Cheryl. I don't know if it should go into
could end up a Hall of Fame somewhere. Yeah.
I'm not sure, but it really was the heartbeat of Canada.
Well, Chief Willie Littlechild sounds like something special too.
He is great. And Thomas Bach knows him well. He's known on the international stage, and I'd worked with him with 2010 and, with Vancouver possibly putting in a bid for 2030. So a lot of the nations will be involved as well. Probably
we're watching closely. Yeah. Yes. All right. It's always great to chat with you. You're so great. I appreciate this, and congrats on the successful Beijing.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of the Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.